a happiness atlas. So at QUT You Festival, one of the activities is to actually go out and find places and take photos of them and write some words about it. And that loads up into kind of an online platform about a space that makes them feel happy. And so we're starting to actually map, and that's been going on since last year. We're actually mapping those spaces that will actually have almost like a heat map of happy places around QUT.
G'day and welcome to the Choosing Your Uni podcast. I'm your host, Rob Malicki, coming today from Garigal Land in Sydney. And you know what? It's not every day, even though I've been doing this for a heck of a long time, it's not every day that something new pops up in uni land that gets me genuinely excited. And if I can paint a picture for you, last year I was on campus at QUT in Brisbane. It was a sparkling Brisbane day, beautiful blue skies. I was having coffee with a colleague and she said, you know what, Rob, we've got this new program that's now sprung up and it's called QUT You, Y-O-U. And I said, that sounds interesting. Tell me about it. And what she told me actually genuinely floored me, because it resonated deeply with what I think universities should be doing. And that's what we're diving into today. My guest is Professor Gene Moyle, who is the creator of QUT You. Gene, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Rob, and just acknowledging I'm kind of podcasting from Turrbal in Yagara country today at QUT. And yeah, really excited to be able to share a little bit more about QUT You.
Let's dive right in. When I heard about this, I was just like, yes, this is exactly what universities should be doing. So for people listening along or watching on YouTube, what is QUT You?
So QUT You is a new curriculum that's been introduced to all of our undergraduate courses this year. And it focuses upon a broad range of skills that we've identified and that employers have identified are really critical regardless of what career that you go into. So recognizing that basically, you know, coming as a student and heading into a particular profession, you might not end up in that profession at the end of the day. You'll have multiple careers over your life. So the QUT You is about 10 particular units that students can choose 4 from, and they cover everything from AI through to walking on country through to the art of pitching. Really broad skill sets with an intended purpose around the way in which that they're taught connect students directly with each other and the local community.
I think one of the reasons this resonated so deeply with me, when I was doing my undergraduate, I was a science student and I ended up taking these 2 music composition classes just for fun. And I ended up spending all this time in a music lab learning how to use editing software and stuff like that. And at the time I was thinking to myself, you know what, this is never really going to lead to a job, or maybe I'm never going to use these skills again. And then funnily enough, 20 years later, I'm now podcasting, doing lots of video and audio work. And those skills that I learned that I didn't think were relevant suddenly became something that I was literally using every day. And when that started to happen, I suddenly realized, you just don't know what you don't know. And when I start looking at when I saw these topics, when I was speaking with my colleagues, I was just like, these are so critical for the future of pretty much everyone who's walking into the workforce. And I think that's why I got so motivated by them.
And I think that's the thing, we understand when you've been out in the workforce and you've had different types of roles and jobs and switch professions or industries, you understand how important different types of skills are. So recognizing that, QUT You really came about to provide those students with that opportunity to do something outside of their normal course environment. And the way that the QUT You units are designed, recognizing that the students come from all different disciplines and courses. They can be from all different year levels. So part of the purpose around QUT You was about connection, belonging, and resilience, and that recognition of we go out and work with people that come from completely different discipline areas, professions, lenses, cultural beliefs, and the opportunity to kind of mirror that within, QUT for the real world, really starting right from the beginning in your undergraduate courses, that you get that opportunity. But there's also that choice for students to go like, you know what, oh, wow, that kind of sounds interesting. That's a bit different. We do encourage students to actually choose units that are outside of what their comfort zone is or what their actual, normal course is, and in that environment. And so the other aspect around connection is that they end up meeting students outside of the courses that they're in. And often that's probably one of the biggest things that we see in terms of that social connection that was kind of missing post-COVID, that ability to meet different parts or find your tribe, and that opportunity presents itself at multiple different levels or years within their course progression.
Yeah, and that's life, isn't it? I mean, you meet people from outside your workplace. You know, you have to work with people from different backgrounds. And once again, like just the opportunity to actually step out of that while you're at uni is such an advantage. The other thing that really struck me is there are a lot of people that graduate with a Bachelor of Business or Bachelor of Creative Arts or fill in the blank. But, you know, what sets that graduate apart? Well, it's obviously like where they've been and the sub-disciplines that they've studied, but it's also all the other stuff that you do at uni. And I can see how doing these kind of multidisciplinary, future-focused courses just add something that graduates from other unis aren't getting.
And absolutely, Robin. I think that's, one thing around the units are all designed to be, they're all interdisciplinary units, as in they've been developed and the ideas came from academics and professional staff, and they had to work across faculties and schools in order to even put an EOI for the idea. And we've had obviously students involved in their design, development and delivery as well. So that idea of how am I actually broadening my skill base? So I might sit in, yes, a creative industries area, yet the data science for society, look at the use of data these days, having that understanding of how I could utilize data regardless. We know that all the tech that sits behind, even in creative industries and creative practice pursuits, can actually, feed into having skill set that, I might not think that I need that now because I might be like, all I want to do is graduate as insert X, but all of these additional skills around even understanding computational thinking. So a little bit of understanding of coding or how would it be approached in this way is going to be beneficial when I might get out in a large organization or a small startup business or whatever that field might be. And I've got at least some kind of understanding of that. So, and that's kind of the breadth of the different kind of 10 units that we've got in this iteration. So these are the first 10 units that we're starting with. They'll likely shift and change over time as well, depending upon what happens in the world. Effectively.
So are you planning on adding more, or is the idea to sort of have that sort of 10 to 12 kind of option available to everyone?
But we had to start with something. And so looking at 10 was a good kind of starting number, given that students choose 4. So it gave them selection. It gave them a choice over the topic areas that probably over time, like with any unit, you look at how is that going, what's happening, how do we adapt to what's happening externally in the world, and what are those skills and how do they shift? So if you looked at, the top, 10 skills that employers needed, and identified globally, and that was in that World Economic Report back in 2023, QTU addresses 8 of those. Now, those kind of tend to shift and change over time. So how are we making sure that we're adapting to what is needed in order to support people to go out in the world and have, successful, full, but also rounded lives in terms of that's what also QTU focuses upon units around social justice, like real action for real change, or seeing me, seeing you, understanding that we're working with other people that come from very different backgrounds and perspectives. And how do we ensure that we're, working well with others and understanding, access and inclusivity, because that's really, really important. So not just the kind of aspects of the discipline-specific skills of how do I do something and understand that, but how do I, as a human being, actually develop the skills that might be needed in a whole range of different contexts for things that I could never predict now that I might be doing in 5, 10 or 15 years' time.
Yeah, so true, so true. So how does it work? So there's 10 options available. Students have to choose 4. Is that all students now choose these?
Yes. So basically, I think for this year, in the introduction of, obviously, this is the biggest transformation in terms of curriculum that QT's done in its history, introducing it into every undergraduate course. There's a few courses currently this year that they may have to do 12 credit points, so 2 units instead of 4, just because we're waiting for all the external accreditation cycles to line up. But for a typical student, and what every student will end up doing, is they choose 4 units out of the 10. Depending upon what course they're in, the QTU is scheduled at different times in different courses. And that's also why it provides that opportunity is you might be a student in science and your QTU units are in, first semester, first year. And because they're 6 credit points, so 6-week units, you usually do them kind of consecutively in terms of the first 6 weeks and then 7 off in week 8 to 13. So they're done, in one semester. But then your second lot of QTU units might be second semester, third year, or another course course, it might happen in second year and third year. So there's a variety of different times at which that QTU is scheduled, and that was down to the individual faculties and schools to determine when that was. So that provides that richness around, I could be doing, as a first year brand new student this year, a unit in first semester, and I could actually be, when it rolls out, interacting with students in second year or third year in my groups in terms of designed around how the tutorials are run, like working groups and collaboration. So we did actually have a soft launch last year. So we ran all the units through in terms of offering last year for students in courses where they were able to schedule it in last year. So we actually do have an iteration of QTU units where there'll be second year students this year with first year students. And then each year it just continues to roll out and build upon that.
This is massive.
Yeah. And so I'd also like to say, I appreciate you calling me the creator of QTU. Yes, I'm leading the project and responsible, but there's been a massive team of academics, professional staff, people that have actually had the ideas. So how it came about is that we sent an EOI out to the business, to the whole organization, to say, hey, this is the kind of model that we're working on. And they need to be 6 credit points. They need to be available online and across both campuses. We need to cater for designing them for first, second, third, and sometimes fourth year students from any discipline that we offer here at QUT. And effectively those, teams came together and we had about 64 EOIs across the business, which is fantastic. And then through a selection process that also had students involved, it was narrowed down to 10. And then those 10 teams were supported in terms of learning designers as well as student partners. They worked on for a year with then further iterations and developments and design last year in its first iteration on the development and design of those units, meeting those learning outcome requirements that were really about how do we address creative skills, critical thinking skills, digital fluency, and that understanding of myself in my local community, my local community, and a global community as well. So all of the QTU units have to meet the same kind of 2 course learning outcome and then operate within that to try and focus upon the pedagogy of delivery. So how they're delivered is that they're actually the students work in groups together. And so really supported by, and our numbers in terms of the, tutors to students is 1 to 25 to 35 students. And then we have obviously the online versions as well. So it really was focusing upon how we're getting the student and designing the activities in a way that they're interacting together. And then there's one piece of assessment, because there are only 6 credit point units. There's one piece of assessment, and to also ensure that we were encouraging people to step outside of their comfort zone. The assessments are pass-fail, so they're satisfactory, unsatisfactory. So basically there's no threat to students' GPAs. It's really encouraging them to, hey, go out and do something that really you probably never have had the opportunity to do. There's less of a barrier or a threat or a risk for students. So hopefully, opening up those experiences for them.
I love that structure. And for those people listening along who haven't seen under the hood inside a university, we're talking about, this is big changes that are complex. Curriculum changes in institutions are normally incredibly slow and complicated. You've got to get buy-in from stakeholders. Things can drag on for years and years. So this is like just such an enormous initiative that you might see it on a landing page of a university and not realize just how much detail is under the hood of this. Once again, extraordinary. And that's, I think, what grabbed my attention straight away. I was like, you guys have done what? So how did you get into this space then, Jane?
So it really probably commenced in about 2021. So it's probably been a four-year journey. And the university had been considering curriculum transformation like in 2019 pre-COVID. Obviously, COVID hit, and then it became even more apparent around, as we saw the impacts in terms of only connecting digitally and not in person as much, and seeing the kind of flow-on effect of the students that went, certainly, high school leavers, but even more generally, that sense of lack of that person-to-person contact and that ability. And, as a psychologist by trade, really seeing kind of high levels of anxiety and not feeling as comfortable talking to people that I don't know anymore. So in 2021, the university really looked at what are kind of models out there that really provide that it's every student does something in an interdisciplinary way across year levels. And there were a couple of universities overseas that we spoke to that were doing something similar, as in really they created the space in the curriculum. And as you imagine, Rob, to line up courses for students to actually do the same unit at the same time is insane to actually, to achieve. So the work that has gone on to all the curriculum teams and the faculties and the systems that support it, we had to design units for potentially 5,000 students to be doing one unit once it's rolled out to its full level. So we've got probably about 1,000 or more, at the moment in terms of its kind of second year, this being the official year. So it started out kind of looking at that and looking at models. Then we kind of went through a lot of consultation, both internally across the university, students, staff, externally with, high school students, principals, career counselors, employers, really looking at what does it need to look like in order to be successful in that way, what's needed in terms of the types of skill sets. And then after the consultation phase, landed on that model, and then that model was used as in it's 6 credit points, so there'll be 6 weeks that basically they have to be interdisciplinary. They need to be able to be delivered online and both campuses at scale. They need to have, one piece of assessment. So we set all of the kind of stuff that sits in and around it. And then that kicked off then the EOI process for the ideas of what could actually be done in that way. And then that consideration of having that real spread. People can see and access on a QUT website, the QUT You, information about each of the 10 units, and they're very, very different from each other, and it's really a broad spectrum. So yes, it seems very, oh, wow, fantastic. It was nice and quick and easy. No, it was a massive piece of work that has had hundreds of people and students, staff and students involved in the ability to be at this point where we've officially launched this year. So that's kind of where it came from. And really the purpose behind QUT was that sense of connection, belonging, and resilience. So how are we really connecting with others, ourselves, our communities, the broader being global citizens in that sense of belonging to QUT and to feeling like I've got a connection point. And that's where the QUT Festival comes into play, which I haven't mentioned yet. And then that sense of resilience, just knowing that the world is changing so rapidly. And I love this, obviously, as a psychologist, that ability to really help support people to develop those skills in being able to be adaptable, going out into, well, I know that by the time I finish my degree and go into my profession, things change so much and I end up doing often quite slightly different things, that I need to be adaptable and need to have that flexibility and that resilience to kind of, okay, what do I learn from this? How can I adapt to that next time and bounce back with maybe the things that do work well or don't work well, but feel that I'm comfortable giving that a go. So it's also that sense of, supporting students to kind of try and something different as well, which will bring its own kind of sense of mindset and development of resilience also.
Nice. Are you thinking of doing one on psychology? And you're a trained psychologist, but yeah.
Well, there actually is one. The Fighting Fake News.
Oh, of course, yeah. It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, one of the kind of key leads is a psychologist. That's and combined with an expert from kind of digital comms area. That's where that kind of idea came about. So that's already in play. And look, there were so many fantastic ideas that we had. Like, there's probably a whole list of the ones that we had to settle on 10. Trying to deliver any more than that, we were already kind of biting off a big challenge to get to this point. So there's so many other versions and other ideas that were really awesome that we just had to kind of land at 10 to at least get those going, knowing that there'll be opportunities in future for people to kind of submit ideas again for new units to be added, or switched in and out.
Do you have a review cycle built in? So like a 3-year review cycle or something like that?
Look, all courses have internal review cycles as well as external ones. We're looking at that around probably, the difference around QUT You is that we've got QUT You running, but we're not going to get to kind of full scale in terms of, because we had a soft launch, we've got at least some second year students doing QUT You now. So we've got second year students, first year students. Next year, we'll have some third year students, but giving it a chance to really get to that full scale will be, at least 4 years.
Number of years, isn't it?
We review all of the units every year on the basis of student feedback. And that was what was great about running it last year and having the student as partners involved. And going in and watching and sitting and experiencing those units is that we've incorporated the feedback from the students last year, both in terms of the students who did the unit as well as the student as partners, to actually help what are the design tweaks that we need to make in those units for this year. That's an ongoing, development process as it is, but formal review, we need to give it that scope to kind of roll out where it's really at full scale with multiple year levels doing it across all of the unit and then look at that in the context of our broader normal and standard kind of curriculum review.
Makes sense. You mentioned QUT Festival.
Yeah. So the QT Festival, when we were first kind of looking at QTU, we recognised that particular, given that we do have many non-school leaver students doing undergraduate degrees at QUT, the majority of our population is school leaver. So their first experience of university is Welcome Week, that entails orientation and getting a sense of what QUT is about and what the course is about. So we knew that was a really critical time if we're thinking about creating a sense of belonging, that QTU is, one of its key purposes, that initial entry point is such a critical time to help support and facilitate those students to engage with or feel part of QUT. So the QUT You Festival, initially we've been exploring how do we create that as a 4-credit, like another unit, so to speak. But the massive implications of 13,000 students trying to coordinate timing and what activities and staff and all that kind of thing. We just went we had a mathematician, one of our executive deans is a mathematician, and he put his brain on and he had this amazing, mathematically kind of worked out schedule. But it was just then looking at the scope and the scale of that was just so massive that we decided to move it out of a 4-credit scenario and actually situate it as part of Welcome Week. So it's not compulsory for students, but certainly, because of the ability to talk about and promote QTU this year, that sense of actually that identification that these are activities and introduce the concept of QTU, knowing that those students are going to be doing it. And it's open to any student. So obviously we do have students that are current students that come along to Welcome Week activities. So those activities have been designed by academics and professional staff and cover a range of different things like the Happiness Atlas. So at QTU Festival, one of the activities is to actually go out and find places and take photos of them and write some words about it. And that loads up into kind of an online platform about a space that makes them feel happy. And so we're starting to actually map, and that's been going on since last year. We're actually mapping those spaces that will actually have almost like a heat map of happy places around QUT. And that was actually that team that sat behind that, was designed that we had actually the health and the well-being team who have a big background in positive psychology and connected with our urban design colleague.
Yeah, awesome.
Design that activity. So I have things like that. We have printmaking for change. So that's like, come along, you've got a social justice topic or something that you're really passionate about. You can actually learn the art of printmaking and print on a t-shirt or a tote that you get to take away and use. We also had some really fantastic, one was Nightmare Nuggets, and there was a science fiction kind of like, what's the 5-word description of a horror story or a science fiction story, that students come together and work together to, come up with over some pizza and watching a horror movie or a science fiction movie in the library at the same time. So, and then, of course, Blackfella Knowing, which is our Indigenous activity, which really gives that sense of understanding place, Indigenous, perspectives in that context. And really, really the feedback even for that, particularly for international students coming, is having that sense of understanding that. So there are a variety of different activities that are run during Welcome Week that are QTU Festival related, that have been intentionally designed to connect to the themes of QTU and be a bit of an introduction to, hey, you're going to meet different people here, and there might be people that you end up actually doing a QTU unit with. So that was the idea behind the festival, which we've run again last year as a soft launch, but this year at more full scale. Yeah.
Clever, right? I mean, as a psychologist, you appreciate the value of mental availability, right? Like just people seeing it all the time in a big way, obviously then puts it on everybody's radar.
Yes. I don't know if they understand what, it's kind of like, oh, what's this compulsory thing that we have to do? Like I totally get that coming into a course. There's this component, this QTU thing. What is that? So that provides that opportunity for them to feel some definite understanding and connection to it before they actually have to do the units. And QTU, the name actually was, the students came up with the name, and that's why it's in thumbprint too, because it's basically, it's about you and what is important to you, and how do I, develop that sense of self through this experience and develop skills, along the way as well that will serve me regardless of where I end up and what I end up doing.
Yeah, very nice. I'd just like to shout out the uni. I've loved over the last decade, in fact, longer than that, 15, 20 years, how QUT has just sort of continued to innovate and to rise. And I think it's in no small part to having had very stable visionary leadership over a long period of time. What's his, sorry, no, not Russell, Coldrake, Peter Coldrake. Thank you. Peter Coldrake and now Margaret Shiel, who's been there since 2018. And I just can't emphasize, for listeners, can't emphasize enough how important and valuable that is to an institution to firstly have a very good leader, but have them there for a long enough period of time that they can take a vision and see it through to completion. Very often, my observation of universities is if they're changing senior leadership every 4 years, every 5 years, it just creates this unsettled nature inside an institution, which makes it impossible to do something like what you guys are doing there.
Well, look, absolutely. And I think that's the thing in terms of, as I mentioned, this kind of the idea of, really transforming curriculum came about prior to COVID. And of course, Margaret had come from the University of Melbourne and they have the Melbourne model, which is different to QTU, but that kind of concept of how we're thinking about
redo it. Yeah.
Key skills that every student will have the opportunity to do. And so that ability to have that support, and that really this is that a VC initiative around how we're thinking about supporting our students, not only be the best in terms of what they do around their discipline and profession, but also from a people perspective, as well as the different skills to provide them with in order for them to be more effective and successful and manage the minute by minute changes, particularly that we're seeing at the moment that's happening on a global scale.
Yeah, it's going faster and faster, isn't it? I'm sure you appreciate, and I feel like we're the same age, and we're so lucky to have seen this.
I'll say that, yes.
we're so lucky to have seen how the world has evolved, but I think we appreciate so much just how things have changed since we were kids. And I remember getting my first computer and the internet didn't exist and the first mobile phone, and now you see this new AI technology and the way that's blowing up, and the challenges with misinformation and the other sort of global challenges we're facing. And it's more critical than ever that we're all trying to cast our minds towards these big issues and not just stay in our box.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, and that's kind of looking at that scope, that was that consideration in what were the 10 units. So you've got everything from people with robots, in understanding cobotics, as in how do humans and robots interact, because the technology is just going to keep advancing, hopefully not to Terminator movie level, but, it's there, it already exists, it's coming. So I might think that that's not going to be relevant to me, but you can go to countries now when that's already happening on a day-to-day basis, like Japan, so things like that, understanding AI, it's not just the what is it as a tool, which, everybody uses. It's the ethical understandings of if I'm in a role, a position, a job, this becomes part of that. How is that impacting upon that? And also, if I'm in a decision-making capacity, what do I need to be mindful of in terms of its use and its application, and what unintended consequences might it have? So then data science for society, in terms of really that understanding of how do I utilize and understand data in the context of broader societal issues, regardless of my profession, right through to the, as I mentioned before, that walking on country and understanding, place and Indigenous perspectives, knowledges and cultures of oldest ever living, that we have. Seeing me, seeing you, literally inclusive education, understanding all of those things, pitching, fighting fake news. So that broad, we're really conscious in that first offering of those 10 units to have that scope of things that really connects into literally stuff that's happening out in the world that I might see like, well, how is that relevant to if I'm going to go out and be this type of profession? I guess using myself as an example, where I first started out as a ballet dancer, would I have ever thought that I need to understand AI or its use or data or anything? Absolutely. I would not have thought that connection point that I'd end up being in roles or in industries where I need that understanding and those skills in order to do my job in that way.
Look, you've opened an interesting jar there. I have to look at the contents. So, how did you transition from ballet dancer to academic?
Started out in ballet, and then I actually retrained as a sport and exercise psychologist. I worked in elite sport as well as performing arts and the corporate sector. Worked across a whole range of different industries. So I guess this is that thing, is that if you ask me, as a kid or as at 18, 19, when I was still dancing, that I'd end up as a professor or provost chancellor at university, I would have said, what the hell are you talking about? And along the way, worked in the mining and resource industry or the health industry or elite sport.
Oh, for real?
I never predicted that kind of pathway. And I think it's just, I would say it's been through that openness to try something new. And I guess that's point back to QUT You. I was open to, hey, an opportunity comes up to try something or apply my skill set in a slightly different setting. Oh, yeah, why not? What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, I've got a profession, I've got experience. There's I can always go back to certain things. So that openness to opportunities and saying yes to trying something a little bit different. And I know that that's the same thing for students, in that I was having to think about sectors that I had the skills in, that I've been working in one sector, but he was a completely different sector that I needed to apply that to, and saying yes to that and getting that and learning the context in which to apply that skill. And so that's been really helpful and beneficial, in that I've really wonderful career in doing different things, and ended up at a university kind of harking back to originally being a head of dance here at QUT, and then being a head of School of Creative Practice and Associate Dean International and Advancement, and then coming in through to the centre of the uni as a Pro Vice Chancellor and running a whole range of different university initiatives, right from QUT You and curriculum change through to new faculties, through to new medical schools, that kind of thing around the application of that skill set in a number of different settings. And so for me, I can say, well, hey, I get QUT You because if I had that opportunity to learn that stuff or give that a go back then, wow, how much more ready and employable, and even saving a lot of learning time by when I was out in the workforce, having at least some kind of level of exposure and experience with some of those things I never thought that I'd actually need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. Any plans to make these available, for example, to a broader public? So via a short course or something like that? Because I'm looking at these, I'm like, oh, I would 100% be all over some of these topics.
Oh, yeah. So short answer, yes. I mean, we've had, from the beginning, we've had like the first time that we kind of showed the units to our senior leader forum, and people were like, well, can I do that? Like, I want to do them. So the plan is absolutely, in terms of thinking about, offering them, as kind of those short courses or kind of key, modules, I guess, in that sense. As I say to people, even internally, our first priority has been our students. And so we need to see that through and get that iteration going. But certainly there's been no lack of interest in terms of the topic areas, and saying, hey, would love to be able to do those units. We're like, yes, definitely. It's just a question of when we'll get to that point. Yep.
Perfect. So a couple of points of follow-up for anyone listening or watching along. Firstly, lots more content about QUT on the Choosing Your Uni YouTube channel. So I've got reviews up there and a bunch of other contents, interviews with students. We've also got more content on the podcast. And of course, there's the Choosing Your Uni platform that you can find at choosingyouruni.com. And that's for both potential undergrads and postgraduates. If you're thinking about reskilling or upskilling with your degrees, then you can also check out that platform there. And hopefully once those short courses, if QUT You is available as a short course, then that'll be in there as well. Gene, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for sharing a little bit of what's under the hood with the program. And I got to say, I was excited before, and the details haven't let me down. I'm really in admiration of what you guys have created. So congratulations.
No worries, Rob. Thank you. I really appreciate the offer to chat a little bit more about it. It's been an exciting project to lead over the last number of years. And what's really wonderful is that, the actual students get into experiencing now and getting that feedback from them directly in it. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, good on you. Okay, until next time, thanks for joining us on the Choosing Your Uni podcast. Have yourself an awesome day. At Choosing Your Uni, our mission is to make finding your ideal institution and your degree fun, easy and stress-free. So if you're looking to save some time, to discover more and to get personalised advice for every step of your journey, check out choosingyouruni.com. Our theme music is composed by Pasha Shogi and his band Flow, and this episode has been researched and constructed on Garigal land in Sydney. Until next time, have yourself an awesome day.